Hey everyone, I'm Armor Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is the legendary VIP metal monster known as Uther the Valiant. King Daeron's castle was being besieged by hordes of giant dark slugs. They were about to win the battle, but then this robot appeared with his laser sword and freed the castle from the slugs. King Daeron named him First Knight and had a gold suit of armor made for him. As far as Uther the Valiant's design, this is by far one of the best in the entire game. It reminds me a lot of Kai the Eradicator. Both of these monsters, it's really hard to say who has the best design. Let me know in the comments below which monster you think has a better design, Kai the Eradicator or Uther the Valiant. But design is one thing, let's talk about his stats. Uther has a power of 3,476, and in terms of metal monsters, there's currently 21 metal legendary monsters. This puts him in 11th place, tied with Arcade. And I'm forced to say this with just about every single metal monster. A lot of the metal legendary monsters, they tend to be attackers, and a lot of them have a power of 3,542, 3,575, so this power 3,476, even though it puts him in 11th place, it's still a really high power. His life is 28,651, and this actually puts him in 9th place, tied with Ultrabot, so it's very slightly higher than average, not too bad. And his speed is 3,432, which is the 7th fastest speed for metal legendary monsters. And his trait, like all VIP monsters, Bulwark. All status effects have a 50% less accuracy against all monsters of this unique cast. And there's nothing much to say, this is by far one of the best traits in the game. 50% chance to not get frozen, to not get stunned, to not get possessed. There's nothing really bad to say about Bulwark, and this is what makes VIP monsters quite menacing. But now let's see what Uther has in terms of his skills. Uther's sword and Uther's slashes are his default skills, nothing special there. His special skill, however, release all the metal power. Deals very heavy metal damage to all enemies. Allies become immune against special and metal damage. Enemies become very weak against special and metal damage. Wow, talk about a unique special, an incredibly unique special. In a way, this is like General Ingvar's discouragement attack, but only 10 times better, or maybe 100 times better, because this also gives your team an immunity to metal and special attacks. Anyways, this is an AoE metal based attack that deals 65 damage, and once again, let's see what it actually does. Uther's Faith. For the following 2 turns, your whole team will be immune to metal and special attacks. So in Team Wars, this is extremely good. If you were to get this move from the get-go, it would pretty much ensure that you get 3 coins, because you're going to be going up against a metal monster that A, only has metal attacks, or B, has metal and special attacks, and then another legendary monster that will most likely also have special based attacks. So you get an immunity to that. You get Uther's Rage, which makes special and metal attacks 70% stronger. Now my only gripe with this special is that it's metal based and not special based. Normally when I talk about metal monsters, I'm like, hey, it's fine that it's metal based because this monster has an AoE magnetize skill, but Uther the Valiant doesn't have that. So in this case, it would have been better if it was special based instead of metal based. Nonetheless, this is a really unique, really awesome, really special attack, and I think maybe more VIP monsters should take after Uther. Having something like Uther's Face, that's really something unique. That's really something that I could look at and say, hey, I see why this monster is a VIP. I mean, of course it is on a special attack, and the likelihood of getting a special isn't that likely. It's still really nice to have. As for skills group 1 skills, we have Night Slash, Heroic Move, Triple Slashes. There's nothing amazing here. Triple Slashes says deals low special damage to all enemies, but then it's a single enemy right here. Who knows what it's gonna be, but really it doesn't matter. It's most likely gonna be an AoE, but let's move on to skills group 2. And before I actually get into discussing the skills, I find myself saying something I usually say with metal monsters. You can pretty much pick any combination of the following 6 skills and you have yourself a pretty good skill set. With metal monsters, there typically isn't a best skill set, just because a lot of metal monsters have like 2 AoE skills that they can do, which will pretty much wipe out the enemy, or they have 2 really strong skills, which as you're looking at right now, Brave as Heart, 65 damage. Really, in a lot of scenarios, given this monster's power, given strength runes, he can pretty much one-hit a lot of monsters. But like always, I'll give you guys what I think the best skill set for myself is, or you're free to choose whatever skill set you think works best for you. With that being said, Brave as Heart deals very heavy special damage, 50% chance of burning targets a single enemy, deals 65 damage, costs 29 stamina, has no cooldown. This is the exact kind of skill that an attacker should have. A 0 cooldown, 65 damage special based skill. That's amazing. The fact that it has a chance to burn, I think that's icing on the cake. 50% chance to burn, most likely you won't be burning, but like I already said, with this monster's power, given some strength runes, Bravest Heart, this has the potential to one-hit most monsters that don't run any life runes. So you can argue whether that burning is even needed. Do you really want a DOT on an attacker? Not really. An attacker can pretty much wipe out the enemy. That's what they're there for. They're not there to deal damage over over time skills, they're not there to deal effects. Like, do you really care if burning lands or not? I mean, of course the argument is, if burning was to land, this skill would be a lot better, but a 50% chance to land, that's still nice. What I'm trying to say is, if Bravest Heart didn't even mention the burning, we would all agree this is an amazing skill. Because it says burning 50% chance, I've been seeing some people say it's not that great of a skill, but just think about it. Take away the burning, we'd say, wow, that's an amazing skill. So just because it's a 50% chance of burning, don't let that deter you from the skill. In my opinion, it's still a really amazing skill, and it's a skill I would run. It's a great battle, deals very heavy metal damage, gains 40% stamina, gains precision. This skill targets a single enemy, dealing 50 damage, costs 31 stamina, has a no churn cooldown, and this skill recovers your energy points by 40%. Now 40% stamina points, that's either 54 stamina points or 56 stamina points. Because it costs 31 stamina points, that's still a net gain of over 20 points. And on top of that, you get increased accuracy, which can help you set up for a future AoE. So this skill is pretty nice. The fact that you have a metal based 0 cooldown attack, that can help you out when you're battling light monsters. So because of that elemental advantage over light monsters, because it has no cooldown, because you get a net gain of over 20 stamina points every time you use this skill, and because you get increased accuracy, which is going to help your AoEs land and your single hits land, I do think this is a skill you may want to consider running. Bleed adversaries, deals moderate special damage to all enemies, may make all targets bleed, requires cooldown. So this is a special based AoE, 35 damage, costs 37 stamina with a fortune cooldown, makes all of the enemy targets bleed, which reduces their life by 10% for the following fortunes and reduces their power by 20%. I think in the game it's actually 19%. And bleed is essentially the same thing as poison, except with bleeding no monster is immune to it, with the exception of Totem and Timerion. And I do gotta mention Timerion because he is a metal monster, so you might encounter him in Team Wars. Nonetheless, because this is a special based AoE, and because it gives bleeding, it's another skill you may want to consider running. And if you're wondering, why do I need to run this skill if it's only a 35 damage AoE, and you said it yourself, Armor, that if it's an attacker, they're not really there to deal DLTs? Uther isn't the kind of monster that really needs to give the enemy a DLT. Instead of doing bleed adversaries, you could probably just do Bravest Heart and wipe out one monster. Why do bleed adversaries? Well, it's because he has another AoE that if you use both of these AoEs back to back, that's pretty much gonna wipe out the enemy team. And on top of that, if you give bleeding to the enemy and it's reducing their power by 19%, if it's ever a team war involving a rare and epic, that might help that rare or epic stay alive, maybe even a really ranked up uncommon. So there's definitely that. Now let's move on to skills group 3. Heroic Soul, deals very heavy metal damage, 50% chance of making target bleed. This is a metal based skill that targets a single enemy, dealing 65 damage, costs 29 stamina, and it has no cooldown. And this skill has a 50% chance of making the target bleed. So if you compare this to Bravest Heart, they're very similar. 65 damage, 29 stamina, no cooldown. One gives burning, one gives bleeding. One is special based, the other is metal based. Now if we're talking about Team Wars, it's probably better to run Bravest Heart because that special damage versus a metal monster is going to come in handy more than using a metal based attack against a metal monster. If you're going up against light monsters, it might come in handy to run Heroic Soul because you get that elemental advantage. Since both skills have a 50% chance for the damage over time effect to land, I say that's rather negligible. Burning takes away a total of 45% of an enemy's health, bleeding takes away 30% of an enemy's health, but on top of that it also lowers the enemy's power for the following 3 turns, so it's really up to you to decide which is better. Personally, I do believe Bravest Heart is superior to Heroic Soul, but like I said previously, even if you wanted to, you're free to run both of these skills. For my build, however, I would prefer Bravest Heart. Going back to skills, we have Taste of Victory. Deals heavy metal damage, heals by 30%, gains a 30% shield, requires cooldown. This metal based skill targets a single enemy, deals 50 damage, costs 29 stamina, and it has a high fortune cooldown, but you heal yourself by 30% and you give yourself a small shield of 30%. So you'll hear me say a lot that I'm not a fan of small shields because I don't think 30% is that significant, but when we take Uther's life and the fact that he heals 30% and he gets a small shield of 30%, a 30% shield to Uther's base life is equivalent to 8,595. So with Taste of Victory, Uther's attacking an enemy monster, at the same time healing himself by over 8,500 hit points and giving himself a shield that can take 8,500 hit points. That's pretty darn good in my opinion, and because of the effects of this skill, it's another skill I would definitely run. And you can argue whether it's needed or not needed, because a monster like Uther the Valiant, given a proper deny monster immobilizes the enemy, Uther uses AoE or wipes out one enemy monster. You really don't need like a shield / heal skill, but in my opinion it's better to be safe than sorry. And his final skill is called Knight's Honor. Deals heavy special damage to all enemies, requires cooldown. Knight's Honor is a special based AoE that deals 50 damage, costs 36 stamina, and has a fortune cooldown. And there's nothing really much to say about this skill other than it's 50 damage, it's special based, it's an AoE. So to my opinion, it's refreshing to see a metal monster that finally doesn't have that AoE magnetizing plus AoE metal based attack, and in a way it's kind of replaced by an AoE special based attack that gives bleeding, followed by an AoE 50 damage skill. So I'm actually wondering what deals more damage. Is it the AoE magnetizing skill, followed by a 45 damage metal based AoE? Or is it Uther's Bleed Adversaries, which is a special based 35 damage AoE that gives bleeding, followed by Knight's Honor, which is a special based 50 damage AoE? If anyone wants to leave your guess in the comments below, feel free to do so. Anyways, as far as skills, my ideal skill set would be Knights of Honor, Taste of Victory, Bleed Adversaries, and Bravest Heart. If you notice, a lot of the skills I chose, they have a fortune cooldown, Bravest Heart having no cooldown, so it's really great that he has a no cooldown skill. But like I've mentioned before, I imagine most battles, if you just do Bleed Adversaries and Knights of Honor, the enemy's as good as gone. Or even if you would just do Bravest Heart on the main threat, like say the enemy's Deny monster is your biggest threat, Bravest Heart, you're most likely going to finish it off. Say the enemy Metal monster is the biggest threat and it's an attacker, Bravest Heart, you're most likely going to finish it off. I think I was pretty clear why I preferred Bravest Heart over Heroic Soul, but you're free to choose both if you want to, and you could maybe do away with one of the AoEs, or even Taste of Victory, although I really think it's better to keep Taste of Victory in there, just because you never know when you might need that healing, when you might need that shield. I already talked a little about It's a Great Battle too. I think it's a great skill because you get a net gain of stamina, you get increased accuracy which can help you with your AoEs, but as far as using It's a Great Battle, then Bleed Adversaries, then Knights of Honor, that's too long of a setup for me. So once again, Knights of Honor, Taste of Victory, Bleed Adversaries, Bravest Heart, that's my ideal skill set. As for runes, Uther the Valiant is your typical metal attacker, 2 strength runes and a speed rune. Some of you players may be able to get away with 3 strength runes. When your opponents start to have really high level runes, then there's really no excuse and you need to use a speed rune on your attackers. But if your opponents have lower level runes, then you're free to use your 3 strength runes if you want to. As far as how good is this monster, I think he's pretty darn good, especially in Team Wars. And there's several reasons why this monster is good in Team Wars, and I think he's good both in offense and in defense. The reason he's good in offense is obviously because of Bravest Heart. If you run into enemies that have Timerion on defense, and they're relying on their Timerion doing cooldowns activated, when you have a monster like Uther who has a 0 turn cooldown, that's not going to stop you, you're going to easily wipe out the enemy. Working around Timerion is one of the easiest things to do. Now if your opponent chooses to use someone else, maybe like an all-speed Metalhead, to try to do that AoE stun, maybe that single turn possession, or if the enemy has a Mechamancer, because Mechamancer has AoE possession, then Uther the Valiant is still amazing, and it goes all back to his trait. Having this trait, all status effects have a 50% less accuracy against him. Well then, even if the enemy has an immobilizer for their metal monster, if they fail to immobilize you, you can pretty much bet that Uther the Valiant is going to take them out in one hit with his Bravest Heart skill. So Uther is definitely good in offense. As for defense, he's good for the exact same reason. Having the trait Bulwark, even if the enemy runs an immobilizer, he can try to possess you, stun you, there's a 50% chance it won't work. And if it doesn't work, again, because you have a skill like Bravest Heart, 65 damage, if Uther the Valiant was to do this against the enemy, that could potentially wipe them out. Or if the enemy has a Timerion, if Timerion does cooldowns activated, that's not going to affect your Uther the Valiant. So overall, I would say Uther the Valiant is a pretty good monster. A lot of it does have to do with the fact that he's a VIP, and all VIP monsters have that trait, and it's really that trait that gives this monster a lot of potential. And with that being said, that is actually going to conclude my analysis on Uther the Valiant, and now I want to hear from all of you. What do you guys think about this monster? Do you think he's a good VIP monster? Do you think he's not a good VIP monster? How do you think he compares to the other monsters, specifically the metal legendary monsters? Be sure to share your thoughts with me in the comments below. Also be sure to let me know who you want to see analyzed next. And with that being said, I hope everyone has a great amazing day or a great amazing night. Remember to dream big and pursue your passions. Why is he so small?